Hello everybody, welcome back to 40 Days with Dietrich. Our passage today is taken from A Testament to Freedom, not following what we've been talking about the last couple days. The title given to it is Seeking Peace. Dietrich writes, "A Christian life proves itself not in words, but in character. No one is a Christian without character. Only those who persevere are experienced and produce character. Those who do not persevere experience nothing that will build character. To whomever God wants to grant such experience, to an individual or to a church, to them God sends much temptation, restlessness, and anxiety. They must cry out daily and hourly for the peace of God. The experience that is talked of here leads us into the depths of hell or the jaws of death and into the night of unbelief. But through all of that, God does not want to take God's peace from us. Throughout, we experience God's power and victory and the ultimate peace at Christ's cross more with each passing day." The other day in one of the church's book studies, we talked a little bit about suffering, and we talked about the dark night of the soul, as it sometimes is called. And that dark night of the soul is this place where we come up against this profound spiritual feeling that we are cut off from God. And that can be really, really hard to go through. Of course, God is always there. And St. John of the Cross, who wrote The Dark Night of the Soul, that kind of the whole point, that God dwells in the midst of those things in a very intimate and near way. Yet on our side, it can feel very uncomfortable. And one of the things that we talked about was how the church doesn't necessarily do well to talk about that reality for our faith. We don't really kind of explore it a whole lot, and so people enter into those times and they feel like they've lost their faith, they feel like God is against them, and they don't really know how to go through that. Bonhoeffer's picking up a little bit of that in this reading, where he's talking about kind of growth in the life of faith. You know, he's using the language of character and perseverance, but he's talking about growing in faith. And growing in faith isn't just about warm and fuzzy feelings all the time. That's a facade. Bonhoeffer and Life Together would use the language that's a wish dream. That doesn't actually occur. And if we think that our life with Jesus is always just going to be rainbows and roses all the day long, then we actually don't have the faith in the real Jesus, Bonhoeffer would say. So Bonhoeffer talks about that God will lead us individually or as churches through times of temptation or restlessness or this dark night, he says, this night of unbelief. But through all of that, it's not that God is taking God's peace away from us, but God wants us to realize God's peace and call for God's peace and recognize the fullness of grace that upholds us, even in those deep, dark places of our lives. See, the Christian life, or the life of grace, isn't a life where we don't need grace. Let's put it that way. And the life of grace is not a life where we don't need grace, where we have ascended to such high spiritual heights that, well, I can just rest on my merits now. That's not the case. The peace of Christ, Bonhoeffer's talking about peace, that peace of Christ, that sense of internal satisfaction and this eternal kind of restfulness in the presence of Jesus. The peace of Christ isn't about having a life where we don't need the peace of Christ because everything is just great all the time. The peace of Christ is about constantly calling for God's peace, constantly reaching out to God's grace, constantly desiring God's power to be revealed in our lives. And when we live that way, yes, sometimes it can be uncomfortable. But when we live that way, we actually experience more fully the power, he says, the power and the victory of Christ's cross each and every single passing day. And so maybe the challenge for us as we go through Lent and maybe enter into those times where we think about those dark nights of our own soul. Instead of jumping to the conclusion of, well, God has abandoned me, God has removed God's self, or that I've lost my faith, maybe we begin to hold in prayer, where is God asking me to claim more grace? Where is God asking me to call out for more peace? Because when we enter into those times in that way, we might just actually find profoundly the power and the victory of God. God bless you as you go through your journey of Lent, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.